let's see what Abe's goal is, and let's see whether he can actually achieve it. If I believed, like my friend Taka does, that Abe really had 3 arrows, that they were well designed, and that he was actually going to do them, then I would be as bullish as he is. There's a little feedback here, right? Can we get rid of the hum, any chance? Thank you. I don't think so. I think the man's got 1 arrow, which is monetary policy. The second arrow, the fiscal stimulus, I think is not an arrow, it's a dart, which is now flying in the wrong direction. And I think the third arrow is PR slogan. It's not an actual program. So let's take what would success in Abenomics actually look like? Well, this is Abe's goal. Abe's claim is that someone doesn't like what I'm saying. Abe's goal is that he can produce real 2% growth per year. That's going to be the outcome, thank you, of Abenomics, right? Now, since the lost decades began in 1990, these are 5-year moving averages. There was not a single 5-year period in the entire last 25 years in which Japan has achieved 2% real growth. In fact, in the last 20 years, there is no period in which Japan has even produced 2% real growth 2 years in a row. Okay, so we see there's Abe's goal. That's been the last 25 years. These are 5-year moving averages of real growth. All right? So, is there any reason to believe he can do it now? I don't think so. The point is, Abe's entire strategy is really a confidence game. The tutors, the half dozen economists have been tutoring Abe for the last 4 or 5 years. I've been telling him, Japan's only real problem is lack of confidence. It doesn't grow because people don't expect it to grow. If you could get people to expect it to grow, then firms would go out and hire people and invest in more machinery, and consumers would go out and spend. So all you really need to do to get growth is to convince people that it will happen, and then it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it would be wonderful if the world worked that way. That's what Herbert Hoover said in the American Depression. And we see how well that worked out. And therefore, from that standpoint, deflation is seen by these people not as simply a symptom of the problem or reflection of the problem. It's seen as the main perpetuator of the problem. That is, deflation produces psychological depression in people's mind, lack of confidence. So if you only bring about inflation, that will boost confidence and solve the problem. In fact, I asked a very prominent economist what he thought the main goal of Abenomics was, and he said to produce 2% inflation. I don't think so. Inflation's a means to an end. The end is getting real growth that can improve the real living standards of people. So, we're told by my friend Professor Ito that they have produced inflation, and that's true, but the majority of the inflation has come from the weakness in the yen, which means it's imported inflation. It's you're raising the prices of the things you import, energy, food, smartphones, the other gadgets that are made with energy, are made with parts that are imported. Now, if you look back at the last 3,000 or 4,000 years of history, I dare you to find a single nation that has grown faster because it paid the Arabs more for their oil, or the Koreans more for their smartphones, or the Americans more for their smartphones, for that matter. It doesn't happen. What really happens is you take the money out of the pockets of Japanese firms and consumers, and you put it into the hands of the Arab oil sheiks, or the Korean, or Samsung, or Apple, or whatever. And the result is that, these great charts that I'm not going to show you because of time, the result is the real wages of the Japanese people, that is to say, the nominal wage they get, they see adjusted forward price changes. It's been falling for years and has fallen at even faster rates since Abe came to power. It's at the lowest rate since before the big global recession back in 2006. Well, how do you get people to spend more if they have less income to spend? It's going to get worse now because they're raising the taxes from this consumption tax from 5% to 8%. Again, they expect people to spend more while they're leaving them with less money to spend. Doesn't work that way, you know? And so it's really, really hard to get either the economy to grow or to get inflation if if you're doing that. Now, why is he raising taxes? Well, actually, no, I won't go to that one. But on this, because of the time, one of the issues on the second arrow is, economics is about it's not about doing the right measure. You've got to do the right thing at the right time in the right order. Doing the right thing at the wrong time is wrong. This is not the time to raise taxes. For the last 20 years, the Ministry of Finance, which is sort of austerity ideologue, has been telling us cut wages, raise taxes, cut spending. No matter what day it is, do that. Well, you should know, as Europe should have taught us again, or Asian recession, the Asian crisis, 97, you don't practice fiscal austerity in the midst of a recession or a very weak recovery. Yeah, Japan's got to solve its fiscal debt problems, but it's got time. If we look at the propaganda that the officials, including Kuroda, the Bank of Japan governor, have used to scare politicians is, that, if we don't do it, we'll become the next Greece, or interest rates will suddenly spike up because of lack of confidence. Well, this chart, what this shows is the horizontal is the amount of government debt relative to GDP in the 5 years before 2010 when the Greek crisis hit. The vertical is the current account deficit, which is, say, the money that countries borrow from other countries. And we see the lower right-hand box, those countries had both lots of government debt and lots of foreign debt. All of the crisis countries are in the lower right-hand box. They needed both deficits, internal and external, to have a crisis. Because what happens, the foreigners lost confidence, they took their money out, interest rates spiked, the spare parts start coming in, the economy shuts down. None of the countries in the upper right-hand box, including those who had even big debts, none of them went into crisis because they were not vulnerable to capital flight. Japan is in the upper right-hand box. Yeah, it's got lots of government debt, but it finances it itself. The Bank of Japan has shown its power to keep down interest rates. And even some countries in the top of the right-hand box, France, what French crisis was there? UK, do they have a crisis? They're in the right-hand box. More debt than Spain and Ireland. Belgium, So this is a scare story. To raise taxes now means he's got one foot on the fiscal accelerator, another on the even heavier foot on the fiscal brake, and the problem is that none of the three arrows work without the other two. Kuroda is doing a lot of the right things on monetary policy, but it won't work by itself. It's necessary but not sufficient. If you're doing the wrong thing on fiscal and the right thing on monetary, it's not going to work. Now, the third arrow just ain't happening. It's a slogan. It's a PR scheme. We have seen reform in Japan. We have seen it in the case of reform in retail and distribution, which revolutionized productivity by allowing new competition, newcomers to come in. We saw it in telecommunications and cell phones. We saw it in the financial Big Bang in the late 90s. We saw it in the cleanup of the non-performing loans. We have seen cases of reform in Japan, and they involve cleaning up bad books, and they involve allowing newcomers new competition, and it produces productivity. There is not a single thing that Abe has done, or even talked about doing, which actually challenges any powerful domestic constituency to bring about reform. It's all talk and no action. It's a series of very, very nice goals with zero strategy to achieve those goals. If you look at a number of issues, for example, nuclear power. Japan cannot produce without energy. So one of the things you're going to see is that industrial capacity keeps dropping. It's not a confidence problem, it's because people don't know how they're going to have electricity to produce it. All right? That doesn't change by confidence, it changes by building electric plants. Abe's for nuclear power, the public is against it because these nuclear utilities have shown themselves to be liars, they falsify records, they don't trust them. What has he done to force these companies to toe the line? He says he's doing energy reform, but I've talked to the people who want to get into it. It's really not going to make room for newcomers. The agriculture reform is just a shell game shifting from one kind of subsidy to another kind of subsidy. One of the biggest problems, if I could take 1 minute and 30 seconds, is the rise of irregular workers, which is what makes this a human story. A third of the workforce has now become what are called irregular workers. They get paid 30% less per hour. They have part-time and temporary jobs, and it has to do with the response to rigidities of the Japanese labor market. So you imagine these young men in their 30s who got to a good school, good college, but they can't get a regular job. It used to be 4% of them had irregular jobs. Now it's 17%, going higher. Among young men with regular jobs, 75% get married and have a kid. Among those with irregular kids, only 25% get married. So no wonder you have a demographic crunch. You get this vicious cycle. The economy is producing these irregular workers. The irregular workers make the demographic crunch worse, which makes the economic situation worse because there's no tax base to finance things, to finance the aging. And there's nothing in the third arrow which even talks about this issue. So it's a bunch of sloganeering. And in my view, the test will be, do they actually raise the growth? Not for a couple of years, not for a sugar high. Do some foreign hedge funds make money? Or does the economy really grow? Do ordinary people have a rise in living standards? Can they get regular jobs? Do they see benefits? Right now, 80% of the people say they see no benefit, but they expect to. I think soon they will no longer expect, and I shouldn't say soon, sooner or later they will see that it's not producing results, there will be disillusion. And I think that even in a few years, even my friend Professor Ito will have to admit that this was the forecast that failed. Thank you very much.